Hello and welcome to episode number 391. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Are you by any chance thinking of getting your certification as a PMI Agile certified practitioner? Great, because today that certification is our topic. Which brings me to this. If you are a project manager who wants to become PMI-ACP certified, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Agile Prepcast, and get your certification training for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from agileprepcast.com. Today you are going to meet Jonathan Hebert, who not only passed his PMI-ACP exam, but he also got audited in the process. So he has quite a story to tell. As you know, the rules of all PMI exams are such that we are not allowed to discuss specific questions from the exam, but we can discuss Jonathan's overall experience, general thoughts on the process, and his recommendations to you. So you can look forward to an experience and tip-filled interview on how to prepare for and pass your PMI-ACP exam. And now, remember, in Agile, we don't call this a lessons learned. It's a retrospective. Enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Jonathan Hebert, Senior Project Manager for OSB International and a very good friend of mine.
Hello, Jonathan. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello, Cornelius. Thanks for interviewing me.
Hey, first of all, congratulations on passing the PMI-ACP exam.
Thank you very much.
And when exactly did you pass? It was just a little while ago, right?
It was. It was on March 13th of this year.
Excellent, excellent. And before we move on, at this point, we have to include a disclaimer, and that disclaimer is all about the fact that both you and I, we work for OSP International. And among other things, our company offers PMI-ACP exam training and also a simulator, and you've used both in your exam preparation. And we'll probably mention these two products during the interview as well. But we just wanted to make everybody aware of this situation that we are actually colleagues here. So, first things first. If you had to do this again, what would you do differently?
I would set aside more time for preparation, and I would probably time it where not so much was going on in my life. I was renovating a kitchen. I had plenty of work to do. There were many things that were in play, and looking back, I probably could have scheduled things more beneficial for me.
And when you said you would schedule more time, you mean longer duration, or, instead of an hour a day, 2 hours a day? How do you mean?
Instead of how I did it, I would actually choose a different time when I had less competing things going on in my life that didn't allow me to focus as much as I feel it is necessary to prepare and pass any exam.
Okay. The exam that you took is the current exam. Over the years, exams change. Right now, PMI has the exam based on a recommended reading list of about 12 books, and we expect this will change sometime in the future, and they will move over to an Agile practice guide. However, do you feel that the way you studied is still valid, even if those listening to this interview in the future, they may be using different books, maybe even that PMI Agile Practice Guide, a completely different exam content outline? Is it still valid in the future, what you've done?
I think it is. So there are 12 references, as you said, and I read every one of them back to front. No, that's ridiculous. That's 4,000 pages of text. That is over-preparing at the very least. What I did was I was able to find a PMP Exam Prep book that summarized well all 12 books and excerpted the topics from those books that are most important in the exam. So I do feel like the way that I prepared is very applicable in the future. And I believe, as you do, that there will be some sort of reference that is very similar to the PMBOK guide for PMP for Agile, because to read 12 books to cover that amount of material is a little bit much to ask.
Why exactly did you choose to become PMI-ACP certified? What was your driver, other than me constantly saying, hey, Jonathan, you got to get certified?
Well, yeah, there were those reasons. There were two reasons, because I needed to get certified in order to fully understand Agile project management practices, as well as to be qualified to author questions and review content. And that's, from the job perspective. But I personally believe, and I think most people that do become Agile certified and do study the methodologies, they believe that this is the best approach for knowledge-based work that's complex, it's fast-moving, it's volatile, and the kind of work that really dominates our age now, which is the information age. So I think Agile offers superior project management approaches to do that type of work.
Mm. Of course, because our work here at the company is Agile focused for the Agile training, the Agile simulator. That was a clear reason why you did this. But you're also CSM certified, right?
I am CSM certified.
Okay, so certified Scrum Master. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I suggest that for others as well. It does focus in on one of the methodologies, Scrum, and it's probably one of the more popular methodologies that is used in Agile.
Mm-hmm. Did you look at any of the other certifications that are out there? The IPMA offers something, universities?
I didn't, actually. I pretty much knew that I needed to become Agile PMI-ACP certified, and that was my primary goal. I didn't look at the other certifications.
Okay. And how long did it take you from start to finish? So start being me going for the first time, hey, Jonathan, you need this certification, until you've actually passed.
It took 8 months, which is relatively short compared to my PMP journey.
Okay. How long was the PMP journey then in comparison?
That was a couple years, actually, from knowing I wanted to do it and committing to do it to actually putting the time aside and accomplishing that goal.
So in other words, your PMI-ACP was a lot more agile than the PMP.
It was definitely more agile. And in the spirit of Agile, I took a look and there was a retrospective and I improved my approach. One of the tenets of Agile project management.
So you started out as a traditional project manager. And this is also how you and I got to know each other, because my wife happened to work at the same company that you worked at, and you were on the same project. And so we got to know each other back then. And how, because you came from the traditional side, how did you then determine that you were actually eligible to take this Agile certification, coming from the traditional side and doing waterfall projects?
Well, fortunately, OSP primarily uses Agile methodologies to manage their projects. Being a project manager at OSP, I was using Agile methodologies. I was using the practices, the tools, the techniques, and therefore I was qualified based on those Agile projects that I participated in and that I ran in various roles.
Yeah, and that's actually an important distinction here. This is the Agile Certified Practitioner. This is not a project management certification. So you weren't necessarily labeled as the project manager of the projects you worked on for us, right?
That's correct. I played, I think, 3 roles, 2 primarily, Scrum Master and Agile team member on Agile projects where someone else was a Scrum Master or a product owner. And then I stepped in for a product owner occasionally when we didn't have the product owner, but I understood the product owner's views and his acceptance and command of what the customer was looking for. And so therefore I played 2 primary roles, Scrum Master, an Agile team member, and then product owner occasionally.
Mm-hmm. What was the process like for your application for the ACP exam? Because I remember vividly when I applied for the PMP exam, that was a project on its own, and the same probably for you. If you compare this to the PMI-ACP application.
It's very similar. So you have to establish a certain period of time managing Agile projects. When you put together your application, you are asked to provide details about each project, what role you played, what activities were taken part, or what activities were important and necessary for you to complete your Agile projects. And therefore, you should be using terminology that is of Agile project management. Mm-hmm. So I see them as very similar. Of course, it's easier to do it the second time. So if you've done it for the PMP, you sort of know what to expect. And I had a little bit of the help too, because I had a couple of colleagues that had already applied and shared their applications with me. So I had pretty much a template.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to interview both of those colleagues as well, so the listeners can look forward to hearing Yasmin and Stars as well about what they have to say about this. But something absolutely fantastic, from my perspective at least, and for this interview, happened to you once you hit submit. You got audited.
Yes, I did. It's funny. What is fantastic for someone else is not so fantastic for another person.
Yes.
So like the PMP, I thought I would sail right through, and the audits are a lottery, and I didn't think I'd win the lottery, but I won the lottery.
This time you did. And it didn't go as smoothly as we had hoped, actually, right? So I was the contact person that you had put down on your projects because they were done within our company. And so you sent me the package. I did what I had to. I printed everything out. I read it. I verified that all the information was correct. Then I signed where PMI had me sign, and I put all these documents into a sealed envelope, and then I mailed that sealed envelope to you overnight so that you could then create a complete package and send that to PMI. What did you do on your side? So after you gave me the documents that I had to sign for you.
So what I had to do was take the documents for myself and actually send them to PMI to be evaluated and to go through the audit process. And the audit process took about 5 days. I was, of course, expecting that I would pass the audit. Everything that I had put forth was factual, and I had a verification from my employer, and I provided them all the information that they asked for. But what I got back was that my audit information was incomplete, and that they needed, in addition to what I provided, they needed again they needed proof of my education. So part of being able to apply for the exam is that you have had to have obtained a bachelor's degree and a certain number of hours. And if you haven't, it's more hours, so similar to the PMP. And they needed that additional information. But it wasn't made very clear. I found out in one of their FAQs. So they asked me for some additional information, which I provided, but I did not also provide a copy of my degree or a copy of my transcripts initially, and that held up the process.
All right. And did you have to submit that along with this? Is this normal that you have to send a copy of your degree? Or was it just in your case that they wanted to see this?
It is normal, but it isn't as clear as it could be. In the information that they needed from me, I provided all the information that was listed in that section of the explanation for the audit. but it was not obvious to me that I had to again show my degree. And I had assumed I wouldn't have to look in the FAQs to find that out, and that they already had that proof since I was
PMP certified, right?
Exactly.
It was accepted back then.
Right. So this was this was a little bit of something that threw me off, and then in getting in touch with PMI, there were a couple of hiccups where kind of one hand didn't know what the other hand
on the PMI side.
On the PMI side, yes. So they asked again for all of the records that showed that I had engaged in Agile projects, and I had to...
Which you've already sent.
Exactly. So it went between two different people, and in the handoff, the information wasn't conveyed. So it was easy enough fixed, and when I provided them a copy of my education records and the other things that they had asked for, within a couple of days, I was told I passed the audit.
Okay. Let me just summarize and make sure that I understand where the problem was in the beginning. So you submitted your application, and then you were informed by PMI that your application is being audited. As part of that, they sent you instructions and an FAQ of what you had to return to them, but it wasn't 100% clear to you what are all the things that I have to include in this package. Is that something correct?
Exactly. If they would have taken the requirements for yet again proving that I had achieved a certain degree and pushed that from the FAQ up into the little list that they had bullet pointed for me, I would have definitely provided that the first time.
So lesson learned here, huh?
I think it's a lesson learned for PMI, and that it's an improvement that they can do, and it's also a lesson learned to others that if there's something that is in the FAQs, it's probably best to send more than less. You need to, less. Yeah, so, because it's quite a shock to hear that your audit may have failed.
Yeah,
that's the last thing you want.
So good recommendation would be when they send you everything, print it out, take a highlighter, go through it, and look at all the potential documents that they may require you to send, and send them.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Now let's move back. Now you've submitted your application. How exactly did you study for the exam?
So I studied by, it was sort of a three-part approach. The first part was buying a good PMI ACP Exam Prep book. Secondly, obviously, by actually doing Agile and becoming an Agile project manager. And to get that background and that training, I, of course, availed myself of the Agile Prepcast. So the Agile Prepcast gave me a background in Agile. I purchased an PMI-ACP Exam Prep book, and then I used a simulator and for some free questions that were all pretty much available on the internet. There's lots of free questions, and there are less good free questions than there are free questions. But that was my three-part approach.
What book did you buy?
I bought PMI-ACP Exam Prep, the second edition, by Mike Griffiths.
Okay.
And Mike Griffiths is very involved with Agile project management and PMI.
And obviously you used the Agile Prepcast, which is the product that we mentioned earlier that our company developed. And you used also the PM exam simulator for the ACP exam, which is also our product. You said free questions. Now, we also offer free questions in our simulator itself. And you said some of the free questions out there were not so up to par. What's the biggest issue with the free questions that you've seen out on the web?
And I think I can speak to this better now, having taken the exam and passed the exam, is that there's two things that I think are shortcomings of most of the questions that I saw. First off, is that the questions on the exam are brief. They are very situational, and they require you to have a mindset, a understanding of the Agile principles and the Agile values that are outlined in the Agile Manifesto. It's not remembering what those are. You won't be asked a question like, what's the seventh principle of the Agile Manifesto? But you should know what that seventh principle is, and you should know how to use it. And those are the questions that you're going to find. So questions that were too long and questions that did not force you into a situational, mindset and have you operate using the Agile mindset and the values and principles to answer them, was the biggest shortcoming. And then the second biggest was the lack of explanation of the answers. So it does very little good, I think, from a teaching perspective to have a question, a set of 4 answers, and a correct answer. I think to really learn, you need explanations, and ideally you get explanations per choice for each of those answers that are provided. It tells you why one of the answers or many of the answers were wrong and why the correct one is correct.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, we can also say that while you took the exam, while you prepared for the exam, we were in the middle of finalizing the development of our ACP simulator, the questions for the simulator. And based on the feedback that you brought home from the real exam, we kind of came to a screeching halt. We stopped the development, we regrouped, and then we updated the questions so that they are more reflective of the real exam. And that was actually, from my perspective as the product owner, I was kind of like, oh my God, you guys are suddenly going to stop the development? This is going to delay the project and all that. But you then convinced me, come on, this is an agile principle. Value for the customer. We have to do what's right here.
Exactly. And both of my colleagues, they weren't hard to convince. They saw the same thing on the exam, and they realized if we are selling something that it not only teaches but prepares you to pass the exam, it has to look like the exam. And I can say without any reservation whatsoever, our exams look like the exam that you were going to sit for because of this shift. And it was, I'm sure I could feel the uncomfortability and the extra work and, having to do this. But that is it really, if you want something that is a success story in Agile, I believe that is a success story in Agile.
Mm-hmm. Earlier on, you jokingly mentioned that you read all the 12 books. Have you looked into any of them at all? You didn't mention them. You just mentioned Matt Griffith's book.
Yeah, of course. I looked into several of them. There's some very good references. Mike Cohn's references are excellent. And there was another author, Alistair Coburn. His references were equally as useful. And I found many questions on the exam to be very much like what were being covered in his book, in their books.
Mm-hmm. You said it was about 8 months in total that it took you, from start to finish. Out of those 8 months, how many of these months were spent studying and preparing, just purely calendar months? And then do you know how many hours you actually put in?
Yeah, I think I could probably answer it better in terms of the number of hours.
Okay.
I would estimate that it took 80 to 100 hours of study time to prepare for taking the exam, to get to a point where I felt very prepared, actually.
Is that including watching the video lessons of the Agile Prepcast?
That is including watching the video lessons. Yeah, I would say probably more like 120 hours then.
Okay.
So the video lessons plus the study in the prep book and the exams that I took, anywhere from, I would say, 100 to 120 hours. So a good 3 weeks full time.
Mm-hmm. Did you create a brain dump sheet?
I did not. The Agile exam is different than the PMP exam, and I don't see how a brain dump sheet would help you as much. It's much less a knowledge-based fact memorization, that kind of thing, than it is, here's your situation, here are 4 options, which one is the correct one? So that doesn't lend itself to a brain dump sheet as much. And from what I understand and read, the Prometric sites themselves and PMI are not permitting brain dumps.
Actually, they do permit brain dumps.
You're
just not allowed to write them down until you click the start button. That's the big change that has recently come out. So up until about 2 months ago, you could walk into the exam room, you could sit down, you could take the paper and the pencil that they gave you, and you could just write down your dump. And once you're done, you would hit the start button. That's no longer permitted. So you have to sit down. You can go through the tutorial. At the end of the tutorial, you have to press start. Now the 3-hour countdown for your ACP exam starts. And now you're allowed to start writing something down onto the scratch paper.
That explains why the person at the Prometric site was standing behind me for a little while.
Yes.
Looking over my shoulder.
They now do that.
Yeah.
They now make sure that you don't write anything down. Okay. You mentioned that there was really no memorization. So everything needs to be internalized. No memorization. You have to have the mindset of Agile. Is that right?
That's right. If there is anything that you should probably specifically commit to memory, it's the most often used approaches for Agile. Agile is a set of different techniques, and Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban, test-driven development. They're some of the more important things. So you should understand the practices and the roles of each of those methodologies or techniques. How they're used, when they're used. Those are important things to, I don't want to say commit to memory, but to have in that Agile mindset.
When we developed the Agile Prepcast originally, we decided to go broad and introduce the student to the spectrum. So we also have things in there like a DSDM, a turn, and we also talk about the crystal methodologies. How valuable were those for you as you prepared? Did they just help solidify your understanding of Agile, or was that just like, you know what, I wouldn't have needed to watch these?
They solidified my understanding. It was a good exposure to other methodologies, of course, but I didn't see questions in those particular methodologies that you mentioned, DSDM and Crystal. I didn't see exam questions that asked about those. And I've looked at a lot of lessons learned, and there seems to be that same experience with others. But I think the broad approach was the best approach for me initially because I didn't have the Agile experience. So I needed a foundation.
Where exactly did you take the exam?
I took the exam here in Anaheim, California, actually, at a Prometric site.
What was the test center like? Somebody recently told me they took the PMP exam. They felt like they were going through the security checkpoint at a airport. It was almost they had a wand there, and they were checking them for metal in the pockets and all that.
They did that, yes.
Seriously?
I had to take my glasses off. They took a good look at my glasses, emptied my pockets. I had to take off all jewelry, my cell phone, everything goes into a locker, and that's the last you see of it. Until the end of the exam, you roll up your sleeves, you pull up the bottoms of your trousers, and once they're satisfied that you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be, that you're then allowed to take the exam. And yes, the wand was part of that.
Interesting. Well, what type of identification did they ask you to bring?
I brought a driver's license, and just to be sure, I brought my passport, but I didn't need that.
Okay.
Photo ID, driver's license was adequate.
And did you go and visit the test center a week before? I usually recommend that to my students and say, you've probably never been to this place, so why don't you go there a week before and make sure you know where it actually is?
I did. So since, I took the test locally, and I'm in that area of Anaheim often, I definitely went over there to see exactly what the traffic patterns were like and, just how to get to this place. I wanted to not feel rushed at all. I don't think anybody takes an exam well when they're in that state.
Yeah. Did you use up all of the time that's available?
I did not, and that's a big difference from the PMP exam experience that I had. I finished with nearly an hour to spare. So again, these questions are very straightforward. They're short, situational, and the challenge is in the answer choices because there are answer choices that are very similar intentionally, and some that you can easily throw out. But I came in much more confident, and even during the exam, I can tell I was doing well. So it was nice to have an hour to go through and make sure, that I didn't misread anything or that I read something and didn't really understand it.
Did it bother you that you had a whole hour left at the end? Because, if I were sitting there and suddenly, you click on the last one and say, okay, that's it. How much time do I have left? I have a whole hour left. Did I just do something wrong? Did I, did you second guess yourself? It's like, what did I not do this right? Did I just select too fast?
Yeah, no, it was good. It didn't bother me at all. It gave me time to review what I had done without rushing.
Mm-hmm. And did you change any questions?
I changed a couple of questions.
Rather. Okay.
Yeah, I changed a couple of questions, and I went back and I took a look at questions that I honestly didn't see in my prep book, and that I only later found when I did a search online and found that they were, in fact, in a couple of the 12 references, but very obscure.
Mm. How many times did you use the strikeout feature?
I actually use the strikeout feature quite often, and that's a feature that is available on the PMP exam as well. I didn't know that at the time, and it's a feature that we've just recently implemented in our simulator, and it was very useful for finding those one or two answer choices that were completely sort of like wild herrings, where this isn't going to be one of the choices. So I used it, and it was very useful.
Right. And quickly, for those of our listeners who don't know what the strikeout feature is, so imagine the question is displayed to you in the exam room on the screen, and then you read through the questions, and then you have A, B, C, D, you have your 4 answers. And then you look at these questions, you go, oh, D is obviously wrong, right? So what you can now do is you right-click on D, and the answer is now, strike through. There is a line going through the text quite clearly, and you see that I have eliminated this answer because I think it's completely wrong, and then you can focus on the other 3, right?
Exactly.
Was there anything surprising or unexpected during your exam?
I was a little surprised that I finished that early, to be honest.
I would be,
I have a son who completes exams very quickly and has his whole life, and I've always kind of tried to, push upon him the importance of it's not the most important thing to hand the exam to the instructor first. It's that you make sure that what you've done is your best. So I was surprised that I finished quickly, but I was a happy surprise, and it just further gave me confidence that I had done well.
How nervous were you when you kind of hovered the mouse over that end exam button?
I wasn't nervous. I'm trying not to sound overconfident, but I was very nervous when I took the PMP exam and clicked that complete button. But again, I felt good. I finished in plenty of time. I had time to review my answers, and I think the Agile project management and the methodology and the way it's done was very interesting to me. So that caused high absorption for me. So I wasn't nervous this time. I was looking forward to what it was going to say.
And once you hit end exam, are you still required to take a survey?
You are, yeah. And I had forgotten about that. I was looking for congratulations. Instead, here's a short survey, and we'll tell you how you did after you're finished.
And how short is the short survey?
Oh, I think it was probably a total of about 15 questions.
Okay, so
it didn't take long, yeah.
Okay. And it was more about, the experience and all that, right?
Exactly. It's a lot more about how did Prometric do? How were you provided what you needed? In terms of scratch paper, this or that. Okay. It wasn't content related to Agile at all.
Okay. And then once you end the survey, congratulations pops up on the screen.
It does, and It shows you how you did in each of the 7 domains that PMI-ACP exam covers.
Right. And we have to mention at this point that about 2 weeks before we recorded this interview, PMI announced that they are changing the examination report. So there is a new examination report coming to all of the exams. And so we are not going to discuss what does the examination report look like right now, because we don't want to confuse here with how it's done currently versus how it's done in about 3 months' time down the road. Once you went out and you met the team out there, the proctors, did they give you anything?
They did not give me anything other than the printout and a congratulations, because they saw that I had passed. And I think that was the only thing. I was asked to sign again at the end of the exam that stated that I had completed the exam, and that was really it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that document that they handed you, was that in any way, did they put a stamp on it, an official? Did they sign it?
They did. They have an
embosser, right?
Embosser, yes. Thank you. That's the term. And they emboss the temporary proof that you have passed the exam. And you hold on to that certification. And then within 2 weeks, my actual certification from PMI showed up in an envelope. And I have it right here in front of me.
Excellent, excellent. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to make sure that you pick up that temporary examination report and have it with you as you leave the training center, the testing center, because that's your only proof in case that everything fails. That's your proof that you've been there, that you've passed. And I know of one student whose examination reports actually got deleted, the electronic ones.
Oh my gosh.
He had the paper, and he could prove, I have passed. Here you go. Right? Yes.
That would have been too much for me with the audit already. Yeah.
yeah. That would have been horrific. That would have been horrific. Okay. One thing we have to be careful about is not to talk about the exact questions that you saw on the exam. So you cannot word for word repeat those. That's part of the exam guidelines that you accept and sign. However, we can talk about them in general. So are there any topics that you suggest that people make sure that they understand before they take the exam?
Yes, there are. And again, without mentioning any specific questions, I'll say it again. I think you really need to understand and obtain an Agile mindset, and that is know the principles and values of the Agile Manifesto. They will be extremely important and necessary for you to answer these situational questions. Again, I didn't see any direct questions of, what's the 10th principle or what's the definition of this or that. Those questions don't come on the ACP exam. They're again, Scrum, XP, Lean, Kanban. Those are the big areas of focus. You should know those techniques and the practices used very well. There's few calculation questions, so you probably a good idea to know what velocity is, story points, those kind of things. But you're not going to need your calculator tool. Certainly, information radiators like burn down and burn up charts. You should know why they're there, how they're used, why they're prioritized over large amount of documentation in Agile. Yes, I would have people focus on those things.
Excellent. And I think that is a wonderful summary and the wonderful lessons learned and tips for our listeners here. So, Jonathan, once again, congratulations on passing your PMI-ACP exam, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Cornelius. It was a pleasure, and I hope people learn from this and prepare well and pass their PMI-ACP exams also.
And that was our PMI-ACP exam lessons learned, retrospective interview with Jonathan Hebert. And remember, if you are a project manager who wants to become PMI-ACP certified as well, then the easiest way to do so is with our sister podcast, the Agile Prepcast, and get your certification training for the exam by watching the in-depth exam prep video training from agileprepcast.com. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this for all those of you currently preparing for the exam. Don't stress, do your best, forget the rest. Until next time.